Straight ahead on theGrio Weekly, President Biden lays out his agenda for the year. Is he on the right track? How will he navigate Republican opposition? Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett joins us to talk about it. And navigating the information superhighway, we'll have guidelines for how to keep your children safe online. And is burning the candle at both ends burning you out? You are not alone. We'll bring you some tips on how you can recharge your batteries. Hello and welcome to theGrio Weekly. I'm Natasha Alford. Today on the show, we're bringing you top stories from the week impacting all aspects of Black America. And first up, President Joe Biden delivered his second State of the Union address this week. He focused on his accomplishments from the past 2 years and the theme of finishing the job with bipartisan support. The question now is just how much he can realistically get done with Republicans holding the majority in the House. Jasmine Crockett, a representative from Texas, joins us now to talk about it. Representative Crockett, thank you so much for being with us, and congratulations.
Good to see you, Natasha. Thank you so much.
Of course. It's great to have you. So we know that this is your first term in office, and therefore it's your first official State of the Union as a member of Congress. So what did you think of this week's State of the Union?
Oh, it was fantastic. The president may have delivered his best speech yet. And the good part about the speech is that there was actual meat and substance. A lot of times people have a lot of rhetoric, especially when it comes to politics, but he talked about the things that the American people care about. He talked about his wins. We know recent polling suggests that the American people are unaware of all of his accomplishments. So I was very excited to hear him lay out for the American people what he has done and why he is making a difference in everyday working families' lives versus what is being pushed by the MAGA Republicans, which is nothing but talking points, lies, propaganda, and they are not trying to do anything that will actually move this country forward.
It's so interesting, Representative. We saw that there were these big wins that were really bipartisan in nature, right? Infrastructure, those are things that benefit everyone. Capping the price of insulin, that benefits everyone, regardless of your political party. As we move forward, there is a group of Republicans who really have one goal, and that is to ensure that President Biden doesn't have any more legislative wins. How do you think he can navigate around them and Congress can navigate around them to get things done?
Yeah, well, you know what? There's still a lot of wins that we need to finish, right? We do have these major policies that were passed, but we still have to implement them. We still have to make sure that the money arrives to our respective districts, that we actually see the infrastructure take place. We've only gotten to the first step, which was passing the bill, but now is the implementation phase. It was really interesting when the president basically called them out because so many of the Republicans voted against the Infrastructure Act, yet he said, I'll see y'all at the groundbreakings. So he's going to show up at these groundbreakings where they are trying to take all the credit because as soon as we pass that legislation, they were obviously there with their hands out saying, well, I need this for my community. Well, you probably should have thought about your community and actually voted for it, but we'll deal with that on another day. So I think that there's still wins to be had in making sure that we implement these policies and these bills, especially around the environment. I was able to participate in a Superfund demolition in my district, and that went to a bunch of the money that has been set aside to make sure that those down in poor communities that have been disproportionately affected, whether it was lead in your pipes, not having clean air to breathe, chemicals that was going into the soil and potentially affecting your. They invested a historic amount into cleaning this. A lot of people talk about what does reparations look like in the me, the first step that we have to take is acknowledge that there are these disproportionate effects that are hurting certain communities and held us back in making sure that we are righting some of those wrongs. And so while it wasn't named reparations, when we know that clean up some of these communities we know that more opportunities arise to bring in development, to bring in those grocery stores, things like that. So there's so many great opportunities that we still have in the implementation phase, and I think that's what we're going to see in these next couple of years.
You know, I think to sum it up, the proof is in the pudding. So we have these great ideas, but ultimately, if the implementation works, then people will see that, you know, it does make a difference what type of policies you support, and that these policies benefit everyone, not just Democrats or Republicans. Really quickly, Representative, this moment, this powerful moment where Tyre Nichols' parents were in the audience, they've been through so much, and they were there. They showed up. They found the strength to show up. And they're asking for the Justice in Policing Act, the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, to finally pass. How optimistic are you about seeing this bill pass? What can be done to make sure that it does?
You want me to be honest? You said optimistic.
Yes, yes.
You know, I'm not very optimistic based upon the posture that I've seen from the majority of the right and the lack of courage that I see from the right. Interestingly enough, as a civil rights lawyer, as somebody that served in the Texas legislature and served on the criminal jurisprudence committee in the Texas legislature, I oftentimes had to deal with law enforcement. And I've also done criminal defense work. And when I had conversations with law enforcement, they were always very real. And I think that we've gotten to a place in this country where if you say anything that is opposite of law enforcement, then you're anti-law enforcement and you're the devil. And if you don't support everything, then you somehow are anti. And so I've never taken that approach. I've always taken a very real and honest approach. My cousin is a local law enforcement agent, and I've got so many other friends that serve. And so we've got to actually engage in conversation. And I will tell you that historically, I have had the respect of law enforcement because I know what I'm talking about. And they know that I'm being real. We're not going to play these games. We're not going to continue to support a culture that is harming all law enforcement officers and making the streets even more dangerous for them. Because if there is a perception that all law enforcement is bad, that makes it a dangerous situation for them as well. We want good officers on the streets. We all want to feel protected. But unfortunately, what we have seen time and time again in this country is that there's only a select few. And so right now, as I sit on the oversight committee, I did try to file an amendment, or I did file an amendment to bring back the subcommittee on civil rights and civil liberties, which would have carried issues such as what happened in Tyre, and make sure that we're having a real conversation around policing so that we could propose real legislation that would make everyone in this country feel safe. Unfortunately, they don't even want to have a conversation. So do I feel optimistic that we will get to the legislation point? I absolutely don't. Because if we can't even talk about it, then how is it that we're going to be able to sit down and come up with a bipartisan piece of legislation that brings all the stakeholders to the table that can really solve the problem? They are not interested in solving the problem. In fact, today in oversight, we're dealing with Twitter, because Twitter is more important to them than actually talking about Black and brown lives that are being lost in the streets every single day in this country.
Well, it just goes to show that change is going to also include changing hearts and minds, as well as proposing legislation. Really, really great points, Representative Crockett. Please stay with us, because after the break, I want to talk about how you decided to get into politics, a lesson for a lot of the audience that's watching. Stay with us.